Nothing changed in his life until he changed what he focused on. Ethan wasn't lazy, he wasn't unlucky either. He worked hard, woke up early, and tried his best. Yet his life felt scattered, noisy, and stuck. Every morning, his mind jumped from one thought to another. Unfinished goals, social media, other people's success, regrets from yesterday, fears about tomorrow. He was busy all day, but at night he felt empty. Progress was slow. Confidence was weaker than before. One evening, after another exhausting day that led nowhere, Ethan sat alone in silence. No phone, no music, just his thoughts. That was the moment he realized something painful but true. His biggest problem wasn't lack of talent, it was lack of focus. He understood that his energy was being wasted in 1,000 directions, and deep inside, a question slowly formed in his mind. What if changing my focus could change my life? That night, Ethan made a quiet decision. Not a dramatic promise, not a huge goal. Just one simple choice. Tomorrow, I will focus on one small habit and protect my attention at all costs. He didn't know it yet, but this small decision was the beginning of a transformation that would change everything. Because a focused mind doesn't just work harder, it works wiser. The next morning, Ethan woke up with the same problems, but a different intention. Nothing magical had happened overnight. His phone was still full of notifications, his to-do list was still long, his doubts were still there. But this time, he didn't reach for his phone. Instead, he sat on the edge of his bed and chose one small habit. Just 10 minutes of focused silence. No music, no scrolling, no multitasking. At first, it felt uncomfortable. His mind resisted. Thoughts rushed in like noise from a busy street. Worries, memories, random ideas. He almost gave up after 2 minutes. This is pointless, he thought. But he remembered his decision from the night before. Not to be perfect, just to stay. So he stayed. Minute by minute, the noise softened. His breathing slowed. For the first time in months, he wasn't reacting to everything. He was simply present. Those 10 minutes didn't change his life that morning, but something subtle happened. When he started his day, he noticed he was calmer. He finished one task without jumping to another. He listened more carefully. He felt less rushed. That evening, he realized something important. Focus wasn't about forcing productivity. It was about training attention gently and daily. The habit was small, almost invisible, but Ethan sensed it carried a quiet strength. And for the first time in a long while, he went to sleep feeling hopeful. Not because everything was fixed, but because he was finally in control of where his mind went. Small habits, repeated with focus, begin to reshape a life. By the third day, Ethan realized something unexpected. Focus doesn't disappear quietly. It gets attacked. The moment he tried to protect his attention, distractions became louder. His phone buzzed more often. Random thoughts interrupted him mid-task. Old habits whispered, "Just check for a second." And sometimes he listened. One afternoon, he sat down to work, determined to stay focused for 30 minutes. 5 minutes in, he checked a message. That message led to another, then another. Suddenly, 30 minutes were gone. He felt frustrated, disappointed in himself. For a moment, he thought, I really believed I was changing. But instead of quitting, Ethan paused and reflected. He understood something crucial. Losing focus wasn't failure, it was part of the training. Just like muscles shake when they grow stronger, his mind was resisting discipline. Focus wasn't a switch, it was a skill. That evening, he changed his approach. He stopped trying to be perfect. He removed distractions where he could, phone on silent, one task at a time, short focus sessions instead of long battles, and most importantly, he forgave himself quickly when he slipped. The next day felt different, not easier, but clearer. Each time he returned to his task after being distracted, he felt a quiet victory. Each return strengthened his focus, little by little. That night, Ethan wrote a sentence in a notebook. "I don't need to eliminate distractions. I need to return to focus faster." It was a simple insight, but it changed how he saw the struggle. Because now he knew the truth. Focus grows not when you never fall, but when you keep coming back. Something subtle started to change in Ethan, and others felt it before he did. At work, he spoke less but with more clarity. When he listened, he was truly present. When he worked, he finished what he started. People began to trust his words. Tasks that once took hours were now completed calmly, without stress. Not because he worked faster, but because his mind wasn't scattered anymore. One task, one moment, one decision at a time. One afternoon, a colleague looked at him and said, "You seem different, more grounded." Ethan smiled, unsure how to explain it. Inside, he felt something new growing, confidence. Not the loud kind that seeks attention, but the quiet kind that comes from self-control. He realized something powerful. A focused mind doesn't chase validation, it creates results, and results speak. Even his inner voice changed. The constant self-criticism softened. The doubt lost its grip. Focus gave him space, space gave him clarity, and clarity gave him belief. That night, Ethan understood that this journey was no longer just about habits, it was about identity. He wasn't trying to focus anymore, he was becoming someone who does. And when identity shifts, life follows. Progress has a way of attracting pressure. Just when Ethan felt steady, life tested him. A major opportunity appeared at work, bigger responsibility, higher expectations, and a tight deadline. It was the kind of moment that once would have sent him into panic. Old habits tried to return. Multitasking, overthinking, late nights filled with anxiety. For a moment, he felt the familiar fear creeping in. What if I can't handle this? That night, his focus practice felt harder than ever. His mind raced. Silence felt uncomfortable again. He almost skipped it. But then he remembered the lesson that had carried him this far. Focus isn't about calm conditions. It's about calm decisions inside chaos. So instead of planning everything at once, Ethan broke the challenge into simple steps. One clear goal per day, one priority per hour. He stopped trying to control the outcome. He focused on the process. The days were intense. Some evenings he was exhausted, but he noticed something surprising. He wasn't overwhelmed. Why? Because his mind wasn't everywhere anymore. When doubts appeared, he returned to the task. When pressure rose, he slowed his breathing. When mistakes happened, he corrected them without panic. By the end of the week, the impossible task was done. Not perfectly, but solidly. And when the results were reviewed, the feedback was clear. You handled this with maturity and clarity. Ethan walked home that night realizing something life-changing. Focus didn't remove the challenge, it removed the fear. And that made all the difference. After that intense week, Ethan noticed something deeper shifting inside him. Focus was no longer something he did only in the morning. It began to follow him everywhere. When he ate, he actually tasted his food. When he walked, he noticed the sky, the air, the sound of his steps. When he spoke to people, he listened without preparing his reply in advance. Life felt slower, but fuller. He realized that distraction had been stealing more than his productivity. It had been stealing his presence. Ethan simplified his days. Fewer commitments, clearer priorities, more intentional rest. Instead of filling every empty moment with noise, he allowed silence. And in that silence, clarity kept appearing. One evening, he reflected on his old life and barely recognized it. He used to rush through days, waiting for weekends, waiting for results, waiting for motivation. Now, each day felt meaningful on its own. He wrote another sentence in his notebook. "When focus guides my actions, peace follows naturally." This new way of living didn't make life perfect. Problems still existed, challenges still came, but now Ethan faced them with a centered mind instead of a scattered one. He finally understood. Focus is not just a habit for success. It is a foundation for a calm, intentional life. And with that foundation in place, something even bigger was about to change. As Ethan's life became calmer, a new question quietly surfaced. Not, how can I do more, but why am I doing this? With fewer distractions, he could no longer avoid deeper thoughts. During his moments of silence, he began to notice how many of his old goals were shaped by comparison, not purpose. He had chased success because others did. He had stayed busy to feel important. He had said yes to things that didn't align with his values. Focus gave him honesty. One afternoon, while reviewing his plans, Ethan crossed out several goals that once excited him, not because they were impossible, but because they were empty. And for the first time, he felt relief. He chose fewer goals, but meaningful ones. Goals connected to growth, contribution, and inner peace. He realized something powerful. A focused mind doesn't chase everything. It chooses what matters and lets go of the rest. This clarity changed how he spent his time. He protected his mornings. He limited distractions even more. He learned to say no without guilt. And strangely, life didn't shrink. It expanded. Because now his energy flowed toward purpose instead of pressure. That night, Ethan understood that focus wasn't about control. It was about alignment. When your mind is focused, your life stops pulling you in different directions. It begins to move forward with meaning. Just when everything felt aligned, life reminded Ethan of an important truth. Progress is not a straight line. An unexpected setback hit him, something he couldn't control. A project he believed in was delayed. Recognition he expected didn't come. Effort didn't immediately lead to results. Old frustration knocked on the door. For a moment, doubt returned. Was all this focus really worth it? But this time, Ethan noticed the difference. Instead of reacting emotionally, he paused. Instead of rushing to fix everything, he observed. He remembered something essential. Focus guides action. Patience sustains it. So he did what the old Ethan never would have done. He waited. He continued his habits without demanding instant rewards. He stayed disciplined even when motivation faded. He trusted the process he had built. Days passed, then weeks. Slowly, opportunities reappeared, clearer, stronger, more aligned than before. What felt like delay turned out to be preparation. Ethan realized something profound. Focus without patience creates tension. Focus with patience creates mastery. That setback didn't break him, it refined him. And for the first time, he wasn't afraid of slow progress because he knew where he was going. Ethan never set out to inspire anyone. He simply lived differently. But change has a quiet way of spreading. People began asking him questions, not about success, but about calm. How do you stay so focused? How do you manage stress so well? At first, Ethan didn't know what to say. He hadn't followed a system. He hadn't read dozens of books. He just protected his attention. So he answered honestly, "I stopped giving my energy to everything." That answer stayed with people. Some colleagues started copying his habits. Short focus sessions, fewer distractions, clear priorities. One by one, their stress reduced. Ethan noticed something beautiful. When you master your own mind, you give others permission to do the same. He wasn't louder than before. He wasn't more impressive. He was simply centered, and that made him trustworthy. That evening, Ethan reflected on leadership. It wasn't about control or authority. It was about example. A focused life speaks without words. And without realizing it, Ethan had become the kind of person others looked to, not for answers, but for direction. The opportunity came unexpectedly. A promotion, more money, more recognition. It was everything the old Ethan once wanted. But something felt different now. As he read the offer, his mind didn't rush with excitement. Instead, it grew quiet. Focus had trained him to listen to what felt right, not just what looked good. He asked himself an honest question. Does this move bring me closer to the life I've chosen, or pull me back into noise? The role demanded constant urgency, endless meetings, and little control over time. It promised status, but at the cost of presence. Ethan didn't decide immediately. He reflected. He observed his priorities. He listened to his inner clarity. And then he did something that surprised everyone. He declined. Not because the opportunity was bad, but because his definition of success had changed. Success was no longer about climbing higher. It was about living aligned. He chose work that allowed deep focus, time for growth, space for life. Walking home that evening, Ethan felt lighter than ever. For the first time, he wasn't chasing a future version of happiness. He was living it. Nothing extraordinary happened the day after Ethan declined the promotion. No applause, no dramatic turning point. And yet, something deeply meaningful settled into his life. His days felt balanced, his nights were restful, his mind was clear. The reward of focus, he realized, was not recognition, it was freedom. Freedom from constant comparison, freedom from rushing, freedom from mental noise. He had time now, time to think, time to grow, time to connect with people without distraction. Even difficult moments felt lighter because his mind wasn't fighting reality anymore. One morning, as he sat in silence, Ethan understood something profound. A focused mind doesn't just improve your future, it improves how you experience the present. Life didn't become easier, but it became simpler, and simplicity brought peace. He no longer needed motivation to stay disciplined. His habits were part of who he was. And that quiet consistency began shaping a future that felt solid, not stressful. Ethan smiled, knowing he had gained something rare. Not control over life, but harmony with it. One evening, Ethan opened his old notebook. The pages were filled with short sentences, imperfect reflections, and simple reminders. No complex plans, no grand strategies, just small thoughts, repeated daily. He smiled. It was hard to believe that everything had started with 10 minutes of silence. Ethan realized something humbling. Big transformations are rarely loud. They grow quietly through consistency. He remembered the days he almost quit, the moments of distraction, the setbacks that tested his patience. None of it was wasted. Each return to focus had strengthened him. Small habits had reshaped his identity, and identity had reshaped his life. He no longer chased change, he lived it. Looking ahead, Ethan felt no anxiety about the future. Focus had taught him trust, not in outcomes, but in his ability to respond wisely. That night, he wrote one final sentence in his notebook. I didn't change my life by doing more. I changed it by focusing better. And with that understanding, Ethan closed the notebook, ready for whatever came next. Ethan was often asked for advice now. Not long speeches, not complicated systems. So he shared one simple lesson. He would say, Don't try to change your whole life. Just choose where your attention goes today. He explained that focus is not about intensity, it's about direction. 5 focused minutes are more powerful than hours of distracted effort. People expected something more impressive, but Ethan knew the truth. The mind doesn't change through pressure, it changes through practice. He encouraged others to start small. 1 focused habit, 1 clear priority, 1 moment of silence each day. Some listened, some didn't, but those who tried felt the shift almost immediately. Ethan had learned something essential. You don't need a new personality, you need a focused one. And that lesson didn't belong to him anymore. It belonged to anyone willing to protect their attention. One quiet morning, Ethan sat by the window as sunlight slowly filled the room. There was nothing urgent to do, no decision to make, no problem to solve. And yet his mind felt fully alive. In that stillness, a final realization became clear, simple but powerful. Focus is not about achieving more, it's about living on purpose. He saw how distraction had once pulled him away from himself, how noise had replaced intention, how busyness had disguised emptiness. Focus had brought him back, not to ambition, not to pressure, but to meaning. He understood now why so many people felt lost, not because they lacked direction, but because their attention was constantly stolen. A focused mind, he realized, is an act of respect. Respect for time, respect for energy, respect for life itself. Ethan smiled softly. This journey was never about becoming extraordinary. It was about becoming present. And presence, he knew, was the rarest success of all. Years later, nothing about Ethan's life looked dramatic from the outside. No sudden fame, no overnight success, no loud victories. And yet, everything had changed. He lived with clarity. He worked with intention. He rested without guilt. His days were shaped by choice, not distraction. Ethan often thought back to that first night, the moment he sat in silence and chose focus over noise, a decision so small that no one noticed except him. And that made all the difference. He understood the truth now with certainty. A focused mind doesn't shout. It builds, it protects, it transforms. Life hadn't become perfect, but it had become his. And in a world constantly trying to steal attention, that was the greatest achievement of all. Because when you master your focus, you don't just change your habits, you change your destiny.